The iron wheels of the northbound train shrieked against the rails as it slowed into Ashford Station, and Aldric Whitmore stood on the weathered platform with his hat clutched between work-roughened hands, watching the cars roll past with a sensation in his chest that felt like hope trying to claw its way through layers of old scar tissue. He had received the telegram 3 days prior, terse and businesslike, informing him that his mail-order bride was being returned due to complications with her previous arrangement, and that if he still wished to honor his original proposal, she would arrive on the 5th of October at 2:30 in the afternoon. The words had been cold, administrative, treating a living woman like a piece of misrouted cargo, and something about that clinical language had made Aldric furious in a way he could not quite articulate even to himself. He was 34 years old, a veteran of the border wars who had taken his military pension and bought a homestead in the frontier territories where the forests grew thick and wild, where a man could work his land without too many questions about his past or his scars. The farm was modest but profitable, with good soil for crops and enough grazing land for the small herd of cattle he was building. It was lonely work, though, the kind that left a man talking to his horses and his own shadow. And after 5 years of that solitude, Aldric had swallowed his pride and answered an advertisement for correspondence marriages. The arrangement had been made through a broker who specialized in matching human men on the frontier with orc women from the northern clans. Such unions were controversial, often condemned by both societies, but they happened nonetheless in these liminal spaces where desperation and pragmatism overruled prejudice. Aldric had exchanged letters with Mira Ashenkith for 4 months, careful and polite exchanges that revealed little of substance, but established a baseline of compatibility. She could read and write, which was uncommon among orc women of her generation. She was willing to leave her clan's territory for a new life. She wanted children someday, when circumstances allowed. He had sent her his proposal in August, and she had accepted. Then, 2 weeks before she was scheduled to arrive, he had received a different message informing him that there had been an administrative error, that Mira had actually been matched with another man first, and that she would be going to that household instead. Aldric had been surprised by how much that news had stung, how invested he had become in the idea of this woman he had never met. He had burned the letter and tried to forget about it, throwing himself into the autumn harvest work. Now she was coming after all, returned like damaged goods, and Aldric felt a protective anger on her behalf that probably was not his place to feel. The train hissed to a full stop, clouds of steam billowing across the platform. Passengers began to disembark, mostly human families and merchants, a few dwarven traders with their characteristic elaborate luggage. Aldric scanned the crowd, looking for green skin, for the distinctive silhouette of an orc woman. For several long minutes he saw nothing, and a cold dread began to settle in his stomach that perhaps she had changed her mind, that she had gotten off at an earlier stop or decided not to come at all. Then he saw her. She was standing beside the last passenger car, partially obscured by the steam, and she was not moving. She stood utterly still with a single canvas bag at her feet, wearing a simple gray traveling dress that had seen better days. And even from a distance, Aldric could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone bracing for a blow. She was tall, perhaps 5'10", with the powerful build characteristic of orc women, broad shoulders and strong arms visible even through the modest cut of her dress. Her skin was a deep forest green, her black hair pulled back in a severe braid that hung to her mid-back. She was looking down at the platform boards as though they contained some answer to an unspoken question. Aldric crossed the platform toward her, his boots loud on the wooden planks. As he approached, she lifted her head, and he got his first clear look at her face. She was younger than he had expected, probably mid-20s, with the small tusks that marked her as female, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of amber that watched him approach with an expression that was carefully, completely blank. There was a fading bruise along her left cheekbone, yellowish-green against her darker skin, and her lip was split on one side, healing but recent. Something cold and dangerous moved through Aldric's chest at the sight of those injuries. He stopped a respectful distance away and settled his hat back on his head. "Miss Ashenkith?" "Yes." Her voice was low and controlled with the slight guttural accent that marked Orc speech patterns. "You are Mr. Whitmore." It was not quite a question, but he answered anyway. "I am." "It's good to meet you finally." She looked at him for a long moment, those amber eyes searching his face for something. He had the distinct impression he was being evaluated, weighed, assessed for threats. He stood still and let her look, keeping his own expression open and calm. Whatever she had been through in the past 2 weeks, it had left her wary as a beaten dog, and he would not add to that burden. "I was told you might not want me anymore," she said finally, her voice still carefully neutral. "Given the circumstances." "The circumstances were not your fault," Aldric said, "and I made you a promise in my letters. I don't go back on my word." Something flickered across her face, too quick to read, and then the blankness returned. "I see. Then I am to come to your farm." "If you're willing," Aldric said. "I've got a wagon waiting just beyond the station. It's about an hour's drive to the homestead. But if you need some time, or if you'd rather stay in town tonight at the boarding house, that can be arranged." She blinked at him, and for the first time her composure cracked slightly. "Why would you offer that?" "Because you've been traveling for days and you look exhausted," Aldric said simply. "And because I imagine the past couple of weeks have been difficult and you might want a night to yourself before dealing with a new situation." Mira stared at him. Her hands, which had been clasped in front of her, tightened until her knuckles went paler. "The broker said you paid for my passage. If I stay in a boarding house, that's additional expense. I can afford it. I do not need charity." There was an edge in her voice now, the first real emotion breaking through. "And I do not need coddling. If I am to be your wife, then take me to your farm and let us begin as we mean to continue." Aldric studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, the wagon's this way." He reached for her bag and she flinched. It was a tiny movement, instantly controlled, but he saw it. He froze with his hand extended, then slowly withdrew it. "May I carry your bag?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, at his hand, at his face. Then she picked up the bag herself. "I can manage." "I'm sure you can," Aldric said, "but the offer stands if you change your mind." He turned and led the way across the platform, very aware of her following several steps behind. The other people in the station were staring, some with open hostility, others with the kind of prurient curiosity that made Aldric's jaw tighten. He had known there would be reactions to bringing an Orc bride to Ashford, but knowing it intellectually and experiencing it were different things. He kept his pace steady and his expression neutral, giving no reaction that might encourage further attention. The wagon was where he had left it, his draft horse Bessie standing patiently in her traces. Aldric had cleaned the wagon bed that morning and put down fresh hay, had packed supplies and blankets in case the weather turned. He had wanted everything to be as comfortable as possible for the journey home. Mira stopped beside the wagon and looked at it, then at him. She seemed to be waiting for something. "You can sit up front with me," Aldric said, "or in the back if you'd prefer, whatever makes you comfortable." "The back is for cargo," Mira said flatly. "The back is for whatever needs carrying," Aldric replied, Today that includes options." She stared at him again with that searching, evaluating look. Then, moving carefully, she set her bag in the wagon bed and climbed up onto the front bench. Aldric walked around to the other side, checking Bessie's harness on the way, and swung himself up beside her. He made sure to leave a clear space between them, not crowding. He took up the reins and clicked his tongue, and Bessie started forward at an easy walk. The wagon rolled through Ashford's Main Street, past the general store and the church and the saloon, past the curious and hostile stares. Aldric kept his eyes forward and his jaw relaxed, projecting a calm he did not entirely feel. Beside him, Mira sat with her spine straight as a pike, her hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. They left the town behind and took the eastern road that led into the farming territories. The October afternoon was clear and cool, the sky a brilliant blue, the trees on either side of the road ablaze with autumn color. It was beautiful country, and Aldric had chosen this land in part for that beauty, for the way it soothed something in him that the war had left ragged. They rode in silence for perhaps 10 minutes. Then Aldric said, "The farm is about 60 acres, 20 cleared for crops and pasture, the rest in timber. I've got a 2-room cabin with a loft, sturdy but not fancy. I'm planning to build an addition next spring, add a proper bedroom and maybe a kitchen extension. There's a creek that runs through the property, good clean water year-round. I keep cattle, chickens, 2 pigs and Bessie here. I grow wheat, corn, potatoes, vegetables for the household. It's a working farm, so there's always something that needs doing, but it provides steady income and the land is good." Mira listened without looking at him, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. "I know this isn't what you might have hoped for," Aldric continued. "And I know the circumstances that brought you here are not ideal. But I want you to know that I'll do my best to make this a good situation for both of us. I'm not expecting anything from you that you're not willing to give. We can take our time getting to know each other. There's no rush for anything. You paid for a bride," Mira said, her voice still flat. "You have expectations." "I paid for the chance to meet someone," Aldric corrected, "and to help with travel costs. That doesn't entitle me to anything except basic courtesy, which I intend to return in full measure." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and he met her gaze steadily. Her amber eyes were hard and guarded, but there was something beneath that, something raw and hurting that made his chest ache. "The first man," she said slowly, "the one I was sent to before you, he said similar things. He was lying." Aldric felt his hands tighten on the reins. He forced them to relax. "What happened? Does it matter?" "Yes," he said. "It matters to me." Mira looked away, back at the road. For a long moment he thought she would not answer. Then she said, "His name was Garrett Stone. He lived 2 towns north of here. When I arrived, he seemed pleased. He was polite for the first day. On the second day, he decided that since he had paid for me, I was his property to do with as he wished. When I refused him, he became angry. We fought. I am stronger than he expected." The bruises, Aldric thought. He felt a cold rage settle in his bones, the kind of anger that had served him well in combat and nowhere else. "You defended yourself." "Yes." His family became involved. They decided I was a violent savage, unfit for civilized company. They contacted the broker and demanded their money back. The broker decided to send me here instead, since you had been the original match and I was already in the region. She said it all in that same flat, controlled voice, as though reciting a list of chores. "So now I am here and you know what I am. If you have changed your mind, say so now. I will not be sent away a second time. If you reject me, I will make my own way." "I haven't changed my mind," Aldric said. "And you're not property. You're a person who defended yourself against someone who tried to hurt you. That's not a fault, Mira. That's survival." She laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. "You say that now. You have not yet found me inconvenient." "Maybe," Aldric allowed, "but I was a soldier for 8 years. I've seen what men do when they think they have power over others. It's not pretty, and it's not something I ever want to be. So I'm going to make you a promise right here, and you can decide whether to believe it or not. I will never force you to do anything you don't want to do. I will never raise my hand to you in anger. I will treat you with respect, and I will expect the same in return, but nothing more than that. And if you ever want to leave, I'll arrange passage for you, no questions asked. You're not a prisoner." Mira was silent for a long time. The wagon rolled on, the road climbing slightly into the hills. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you make such promises to an orc? We are not known for our beauty or our grace. We are monsters to most humans. You could have found a human bride easily enough, someone who would come without complications." "Maybe," Aldric said. "But I didn't want a bride who came because I was the best option available, or because her family pushed her into it. I wanted someone who chose this life because she wanted something different, something better. When I read your letters, I got the sense that you understood what it meant to want a fresh start, to leave behind things that hurt and build something new. That seemed like a good foundation." He paused, considering his next words. "As for you being an orc, I won't pretend I don't see it or that it doesn't come with complications. But I fought alongside orc soldiers during the border wars. Some of the bravest, most honorable people I've ever known had green skin and tusks. So no, I don't think you're a monster. I think you're a woman who's had a rough time and deserves better." He glanced at her and found her watching him with an expression he could not read. Her eyes were bright, suspiciously bright, but her face was still composed. "You are either the kindest man I have ever met," she said slowly, "or the most skilled liar." "Time will tell, I suppose," Aldric said, "but I hope you'll give me the chance to prove which." She nodded slightly, then turned back to face the road. But something in her posture had eased, just fractionally, the rigid line of her spine softening by perhaps an inch. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of something less than constant vigilance. They rode on through the afternoon, and Aldric pointed out landmarks along the way. The Miller farm to the south, with their distinctive red barn. The old stone bridge over Willow Creek, built decades ago by the first settlers. The copse of white birch trees that marked the eastern boundary of his property. He kept his commentary light and informative, not pushing for responses, just offering information she might find useful. As they turned onto the narrow track that led to his homestead, Mira leaned forward slightly, looking. The cabin came into view through the trees, a solid structure of chinked logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. The roof was good cedar shake, replaced just last year. The barn stood beyond it, somewhat larger than the cabin, with a fenced paddock and a chicken coop. Beyond that, the cleared fields rolled gently toward the tree line, stubble from the recent wheat harvest catching the late afternoon light. It was not grand, but it was well maintained and clearly cared for. Aldric had spent 5 years of labor on this land, and it showed in the straight fences and tidy outbuildings, in the healthy livestock and the neat vegetable garden beside the house. He drove the wagon up to the cabin and set the brake. "Well," he said, "home." Mira climbed down before he could offer to help, moving with the fluid strength of her kind. She stood looking at the cabin, her expression unreadable. Aldric jumped down and began unhitching Bessie. "I'll get the horse settled and then show you around. There's a pump out back for water, and the outhouse is behind the barn, but I keep a chamber pot in the cabin for nighttime. I do my best to keep things clean, but I'm not going to pretend I'm a housekeeper. If something's not to your liking, say so and we'll work it out." He led Bessie toward the barn, and after a moment, Mira followed. The barn was dim and cool inside, smelling of hay and animal warmth. He showed her where he kept the tack, where the feed was stored, introduced her to the 2 milk cows and the pigs. She listened silently, watching everything with those careful, assessing eyes. When Bessie was settled and fed, they walked back to the cabin. Aldric picked up Mira's bag from the wagon and carried it to the porch, setting it down before opening the door. "It's not locked," he said. "There's no real need out here, though I suppose that'll change now that there's more to protect." He said it lightly, but he saw her register the words, the implication that she was something worth protecting. The inside of the cabin was simple but comfortable. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. There was a table with 2 chairs, a few shelves of books, a rocking chair beside the fireplace. A door led to the single bedroom, and a ladder against the wall led up to the loft space. "Bedroom's yours," Aldric said. "I've been sleeping in the loft anyway. More room up there than you'd think, and it stays warm in winter from the heat rising. I've got a good feather mattress on the bed, fresh linens as of this morning. There's a washstand and a trunk for storage." "It's not much, but it's private." Mira turned slowly, taking in the space. Her gaze lingered on the bedroom door, and he saw something like disbelief cross her face. "You are giving me the bedroom," she said, "of course, and you will sleep in the loft." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you deserve privacy and comfort," Aldric said simply, "and because I'm perfectly comfortable in the loft. It's not a hardship." She stared at him, and this time he definitely saw moisture in her eyes. She blinked rapidly and turned away. "I see, thank you." "You're welcome," Aldric said. He moved to the kitchen area, giving her space. "I imagine you're hungry. I've got stew that I can heat up and fresh bread from yesterday. It's not fancy, but it's filling." "I can cook," Mira said. "If you will allow it, I can prepare the meal. I would like to be useful." "If you want to, I'd be grateful," Aldric said. "But you don't have to earn your keep on your first day. You're allowed to just rest." "I am not tired," she said, which was obviously a lie given the shadows under her eyes, but he let it pass. "Show me where things are kept." So he showed her the larder, the pots and pans, the dishes. She moved through the kitchen with calm efficiency, examining supplies, testing the damper on the stove. Her movements were economical and skilled, the actions of someone who had cooked many meals in less than ideal circumstances. Within minutes, she had a fire going in the stove and was heating the pot of venison stew he had made the day before. She sliced the bread with precise strokes, arranged the table with the spare place settings. Aldric busied himself with small tasks, bringing in wood for the fireplace, lighting the lamps as the light outside began to fade. He was very aware of her presence in the space, the way she moved, the occasional small sound she made. It was strange to have another person in the cabin after so long alone, strange but not unpleasant. When the stew was hot, she ladled it into bowls and brought them to the table. Aldric sat, and she hesitated before sitting across from him. He picked up his spoon and began to eat, keeping his movements unhurried and non-threatening. The stew was good, rich and savory, even better reheated than it had been fresh. "This is excellent," Mira said after a few bites. "Thank you. Cooking's one of the skills I picked up in the army." "You learn pretty quick that good food makes hard days more bearable." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Then Mira said, "You were a soldier." "Yes, joined up when I was 18, served until I was 26. Border wars mostly, some action in the Northern Territories." "You said you fought with orcs." "I did. There were 3 integrated units during the final 2 years of the war, experimental at the time. I was in one of them. Some of the brass thought it was a terrible idea, but it turned out that orcs and humans actually work pretty well together when they have a common enemy. Orcs are stronger and tougher. Humans are more adaptable and better at long-range tactics. We covered each other's weaknesses. And after, when the war ended, most of the orcs went back to their clans, Aldric said. Some tried to settle in human territories, but it didn't go well. Too much prejudice, too many bad memories. A few humans tried to settle in orc lands with similar results. The integration didn't survive the peace. He took another bite of stew. I think about them sometimes. Wonder where they ended up if they are all right. Some of them became good friends. Mira was quiet for a moment. Do you have a family, brothers, sisters? A sister, married and living in the capital. We exchange letters a few times a year. My parents died while I was in the army fever outbreak. What about you? A brother still with the clan. My mother lives. My father died in a raid 5 years ago. I'm sorry, she shrugged. It is the way of things. He died fighting, which is considered honorable. That doesn't make it hurt less. She looked up at him and something in her face softened. No, it does not. They finished the meal and Mira cleared the dishes before Aldric could move to help. She heated water and washed everything with the same brisk efficiency she had shown in cooking. He wanted to insist on helping, but he had the sense that she needed to do this, needed to establish some kind of purpose and routine. So he sat and watched, and when she was done, he said, "Thank you. That was well done. It is simple work, simple but necessary. I appreciate it." She dried her hands on a towel and stood awkwardly in the middle of the room as though unsure what came next. Aldric stood as well. "I usually read for a bit in the evening," he said. "Or work on small repairs if something needs fixing. You're welcome to join me, or if you'd rather retire, that's fine too. There's no schedule, no expectations. Whatever feels right to you." Mira looked toward the bedroom door, then back at him. "I think I will rest, if that is acceptable." The travel was long. "Of course, sleep as late as you like tomorrow. I'll be up early to tend the animals, but I'll try to be quiet about it." She nodded and picked up her bag. She started toward the bedroom, then paused at the door. "Mr. Whitmore. Aldric, please." "Aldric," she said slowly, as though testing the name. "Thank you for meeting me at the station and for bringing me here and for—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything. "For being kind. You don't have to thank me for basic decency, Mira, but you're welcome all the same." She held his gaze for a moment, and he saw vulnerability there, beneath the wariness. Then she nodded and disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. Aldric stood in the main room for a long moment, listening to the faint sounds of her moving around behind the door. Then he banked the fire, checked the locks out of habit even though he had meant what he said about not needing them, and climbed the ladder to the loft. The space was just tall enough for him to sit upright, with a narrow bed against one wall and his trunk of personal belongings against the other. A small window looked out over the front yard, and he could see the moon rising over the trees, full and bright. He changed into his nightclothes and lay down on the bed, staring at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling. He could hear her moving around below, the creak of the bed frame as she settled, the soft sound of what might have been crying, quickly stifled. His chest ached with the sound of it, but he stayed where he was. She needed privacy to process whatever she was feeling, and barging in to offer comfort would only make things worse. So he lay in the dark and listened and hoped that, in time, she would come to believe that this place could be safe, that he meant what he said. It was all he could offer, this patience and this hope, and he would give it freely for as long as it took. He fell asleep to the sound of the wind in the trees and the knowledge that for the first time in 5 years, he was not alone in his home. The next week settled into a careful rhythm. Aldric rose at dawn each day to tend the animals, and he would return to the cabin to find Mira already awake, breakfast prepared, the main room tidied. She worked with a kind of driven intensity, as though afraid that if she stopped moving, she might be found wanting. She cooked, cleaned, mended his worn shirts with neat, precise stitches. She tended the vegetable garden, harvesting the last of the autumn produce and preparing the beds for winter. She collected eggs, fed chickens, and slowly began to learn the routines of the farm. Aldric tried to slow her down, to insist that she did not need to work so hard, but she would hear none of it. "I must earn my place," she said firmly, and he recognized the pride in those words, the need to prove her worth. So he stopped arguing, and instead simply worked alongside her, sharing the load, making it clear through action rather than words that they were partners in this endeavor, not master and servant. She was wary of him still, moving away if he came too close, watching him with those careful eyes when she thought he was not looking. But slowly, incrementally, she began to relax. She spoke more at mealtimes, answering his questions about her life in the clan, about the skills she had learned, about the foods she missed from home. He listened and remembered, and when he went to town for supplies, he bought spices and ingredients he thought she might use, leaving them in the larder without comment. The first time she smiled, it was 3 weeks after her arrival. He had been attempting to fix a stubborn hinge on the chicken coop and had dropped his hammer twice, cursing mildly each time. On the third drop, the hammer landed directly on his foot, and his curse was considerably less mild. Mira, who had been gathering eggs nearby, laughed. It was a short, surprised sound, quickly stifled, but when he looked up, she was smiling, her tusks visible, her amber eyes bright with genuine amusement. "I am sorry," she said, but she was still smiling. "But you looked very frustrated with that hammer." "The hammer and I are having a disagreement about the nature of gravity," Aldric said ruefully, rubbing his foot. "The hammer is winning." She laughed again, and the sound of it was lovely, like music after a long silence. He grinned back at her, and something passed between them in that moment, a small bridge of shared humor and humanity. After that, things eased further. She asked questions about the farm, about his plans for the future, about the books on his shelf. He learned that she loved stories, that in the clan, oral tradition was strong and winter evenings were spent around fires listening to the storytellers. He began reading to her in the evenings, histories and folk tales and adventure stories, and she would sit in the rocking chair and listen with rapt attention, sometimes closing her eyes to better focus on the words. In turn, she told him stories from her own culture, tales of ancient orc heroes and clever tricksters, of honor and sacrifice and love. Her voice when she told stories was different, richer and more musical, the guttural accent becoming a rhythm that enhanced the narrative. He loved listening to her, watching the way her face animated, the way her hands moved to illustrate a point, the bruises on her face healed, fading to nothing. She gained a little weight, the gaunt look leaving her features. She moved through the cabin with more confidence, claimed small spaces as her own. She brought wildflowers in from the fields and put them in a jar on the table. She rearranged the kitchen to a more logical configuration, and he praised the improvement. She was nesting, he realized, making this place into a home, and the knowledge filled him with a quiet joy. The first frost came in late October, and Aldric spent a day reinforcing the barn and making sure all the animals had adequate shelter for the coming winter. Mira helped, handing him tools, holding boards steady while he hammered. They worked well together, developing an unspoken communication of gesture and glance. When they finished and returned to the cabin, cold and tired but satisfied, she made hot cider with the spices he had bought, and they sat by the fire drinking it, comfortable in the shared silence. "Winter will be hard," Mira said. "I have heard that frontier winters are brutal." "They can be," Aldric agreed, "but we're well prepared. Plenty of firewood, stores of food, the barn is sound. We'll be fine as long as we don't do anything foolish." "Will we be snowed in?" "Probably for stretches, yes. But the main road is usually kept clear enough for necessary travel." "We won't be completely isolated." She nodded, staring into the fire. "I have never spent a winter with just one other person. In the clan, winters are communal. Everyone together in the longhouses, sharing warmth and food and company. Does that worry you, being just the two of us?" She considered the question. "I thought it would. But no, I find it does not worry me. This is peaceful in a way the longhouses never were." She glanced at him. "You are easy to be with, Aldric. You do not make demands or expect me to be other than I am. That is a gift I did not anticipate." "You deserve peace, Mira. And you deserve to be yourself without apology." She smiled, that small, careful smile that he had come to treasure. "You say such things so simply, as though they are obvious truths, but they are not obvious to everyone. Then everyone else is wrong." She laughed softly and returned her gaze to the fire. They sat together as the evening deepened, the fire crackling, the wind beginning to rise outside. It was a good moment, Aldric thought, the kind of moment that made all the hard work and loneliness of the past years worthwhile. November brought the first real snow, a heavy fall that blanketed the farm in white and turned the world quiet and muffled. They settled into the slower rhythm of winter work, tending animals, maintaining equipment, reading and talking by the fire. The cabin, which had seemed adequately spacious when Aldric lived alone, felt more intimate now with two people sharing the space. But it was not an uncomfortable intimacy. They learned each other's habits and preferences, made small accommodations, developed a domestic routine that felt natural and right. Mira proved to be an excellent cook, creative with limited ingredients, able to make even simple fare interesting. She taught him orc recipes, dishes flavored with the herbs and spices of her homeland, and he taught her the human dishes his mother had made, the comfort foods of his childhood. They experimented together, combining traditions, laughing over the occasional failure and celebrating the successes. He found himself thinking about her constantly, noticing small things. The way she hummed while she worked, wordless melodies from her clan. The precise way she folded laundry, each item given care and attention. The fierce concentration on her face when she was mending or sewing. The way she tilted her head when she was listening to him read, like a bird attending to a new sound. He was falling in love with her. He realized somewhere around the winter solstice. It was not a sudden revelation, but a gradual acknowledgement of something that had been building for weeks. He loved her strength and her vulnerability, her pride and her kindness. He loved the way she laughed at his terrible jokes and the way she called him on his occasional foolishness. He loved her competence and her curiosity, the way she approached each day with determination and grace. But he said nothing, did nothing to indicate the shift in his feelings. She was only beginning to feel safe here, only starting to trust. To burden her with his emotions, to push for something she might not be ready for, would be a betrayal of the patience he had promised. So he kept his feelings private and continued to treat her with the same respect and courtesy he had shown from the beginning, and hoped that, in time, she might come to feel something similar. The winter deepened. Snow piled high around the cabin, and there were days when they could not go outside except to reach the barn. They spent those days in the warm cabin, reading and talking and working on indoor projects. Aldric carved small wooden figures by the fire, a hobby from his childhood that he had taken up again. Mira watched with interest and asked him to teach her, so he showed her how to choose the wood, how to hold the knife, how to cut with the grain. She was a quick study, and soon she was making her own small carvings, stylized animals and abstract shapes that reflected orc artistic sensibilities. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in the clan, about the complicated politics and hierarchies, about the raids and feuds that had defined much of her young life. He told her about the war, about the friends he had lost, about the strange mixture of terror and boredom that characterized military life. They shared their fears and hopes, their regrets and dreams, building a foundation of understanding and trust. On the darkest night of winter, the solstice, Mira asked him, "Why did you never marry before? A human man with land and a steady income, you must have had opportunities." Aldric considered the question, whittling a curve into the piece of pine he was working on. "I suppose I never found someone I wanted to share this with. After the war, I was not fit company for anyone. Too angry, too restless. It took me a couple of years to settle, to figure out who I was without the army. And by then I was out here, and there were not many prospects. I thought about going back east, finding someone in the towns, but I could not imagine bringing someone here who did not want this life, who would see it as exile rather than opportunity." He glanced at her. "When I saw the advertisement for correspondence marriages, it seemed like a solution. A way to find someone who wanted what I wanted, even if the path to it was unconventional. And you did not mind that she would be an orc." "No," he said simply. "I told you, I served with orcs. I know that the differences between our peoples are smaller than the similarities. And I thought that maybe someone from outside human society might understand better what I was trying to build here, this life apart from the expectations and judgments." Mira was quiet for a moment. "I left the clan because I could not marry who they wanted me to marry. There was a warrior, strong and respected, and he wanted me as his wife. But he was cruel and he enjoyed causing pain. I refused him, and that refusal brought shame to my family. So I left. I went to the city and found the broker, and I agreed to this arrangement because anything seemed better than returning to the clan in disgrace. I am sorry you had to make that choice," Aldric said, "but I am grateful you did, because it brought you here." She looked at him, and in the firelight her eyes were luminous. "I am grateful too, more than I can adequately express. You have given me something I did not think I would ever have." "What's that?" "A home," she said softly. "A place where I am valued for who I am, not for what I can provide or what alliances I can cement. A place where I am safe." She paused, then added, "A partner who treats me with kindness and respect. That is rarer than you might think." "It shouldn't be," Aldric said. "It should be the baseline, the minimum. You deserve so much more than just kindness and respect." "What more is there?" she asked, and there was something in her voice, a note of curiosity or maybe hope. He looked at her strong, beautiful face, at the way the firelight caught in her dark hair, and he made a decision. "Affection," he said, "care, partnership in the fullest sense. Someone who sees you and values you and wants to build a life with you, not because it is convenient or expected, but because the thought of doing it without you is unbearable." She drew in a sharp breath. "Aldric, I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I am not pushing. I just want you to know that you deserve those things, Mira. You deserve to be loved." "Do you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Love me," he held her gaze steady and sure. "Yes, I did not plan for it, and I did not want to burden you with it, but yes, I love you." She stood abruptly, and for a moment he thought she would flee to the bedroom, that he had miscalculated terribly. But instead, she crossed the small space between them and knelt beside his chair. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and when he did not, she placed her hand against his cheek. Her palm was warm and rough from work, and he leaned into the touch. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid to believe that this could be real, that you could truly want me. I am an orc and you are human, and the world says we should not be together. But I do not care what the world says anymore. I care what I feel, and what I feel is that I am safe with you. I am happy with you. I am more myself with you than I have ever been with anyone." She took a shaky breath. "I love you too, Aldric. I have for weeks, but I was too frightened to say it." He turned his head and pressed a kiss to her palm. "You never have to be frightened with me, not of this." She smiled, and it was radiant, all the careful guardedness finally dropping away. "Then say it again." "Tell me again." "I love you, Mira Ashenkith. I love your strength and your courage. I love your kindness and your fierce determination. I love the way you hum when you work and the way you listen to stories. I love that you are here, and I want you to stay, not because we made an arrangement, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was in his arms and he was holding her, feeling her strength and warmth pressed against him. She buried her face against his shoulder, and he felt the dampness of tears soaking into his shirt. But they were good tears, he thought, tears of release and relief. They held each other for a long time, the fire crackling beside them, the wind howling outside but unable to touch them in their small, warm refuge. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but shining, and she was smiling. "I did not think this was possible," she said. "I thought love was something other people had, something that would always be out of reach for me." "It is possible," Aldric said. "It is real, and it is ours." She kissed him then, a brief, soft press of lips that held more tenderness than passion, a promise rather than a demand. He kissed her back, gentle and careful, letting her set the pace, following where she led. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "What do we do now?" "Whatever we want," he said. "We can continue as we have been. We can formalize things, get married properly if you want. We can take our time and figure it out as we go. There is no rush, Mira. We have all the time in the world." "I want to marry you," she said. "Properly, as you say. I want there to be no question that we are together, that we have chosen each other. Is that foolish?" "It is not foolish at all," Aldric said. "When spring comes, we will go to town and make it official, or sooner if you prefer. We can have the minister come out here if you would rather not deal with the town's reaction." "I do not care about the town's reaction," Mira said with a flash of her old fierceness. "Let them think what they will. We have done nothing wrong." "No, we have not," Aldric agreed. "Then we will go to town in spring, and we will hold our heads high, and anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me." She grinned at that, fierce and proud. "We are a good match, you and I, both too stubborn for our own good." "Stubborn and deeply in love," Aldric said. "I think we will be all right." They stayed up late that night, talking and making plans, stealing kisses between words, learning the new shape of their relationship. When Mira finally retired to the bedroom, she paused at the door and looked back at him. "The bed is large," she said carefully. "If you would prefer not to sleep in the loft anymore, there is room. I would not mind." "Are you sure?" Aldric asked. "I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am sure," she said firmly. "I trust you, Aldric, and I would like to sleep beside my future husband if he is willing." "I am very willing," he said, and followed her into the bedroom. They lay together in the dark, her back pressed to his chest, his arm around her waist. She fit against him perfectly, strong and solid and warm. Her breathing gradually slowed and deepened. and he knew she was falling asleep, finally at peace. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder and closed his own eyes, feeling a contentment he had never known, a sense of rightness that went bone deep. The winter passed in a glow of new love and deepening partnership. They were more comfortable with each other now, more physically affectionate, stealing touches and kisses throughout the day. They worked together even more seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs, moving in harmony. They talked about the future, about children they might have, about the farm they would build together, about growing old in this place they were making their own. When the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Aldric hitched up Bessie and drove Mira into town. They held hands on the wagon bench, presenting a united front. The stares and whispers when they walked through Ashford were no less prevalent than they had been in October, but neither of them cared. They went to the minister's house and requested that he perform a marriage ceremony. The minister, a thin, elderly man named Reverend Thorne, looked at them with obvious disapproval. "You understand that a marriage between human and orc is highly irregular." "We understand," Aldric said calmly, "but it is not illegal and it is what we want." "There will be talk," Reverend Thorne warned. "There is already talk," Mira said. "We do not care." The minister studied them for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well. If you are determined, I will perform the ceremony, but I will not do it in the church. I cannot in good conscience subject the congregation to such controversy." "Then do it at our farm," Aldric said. "We do not need an audience, just the vows and the legalities." Reverend Thorne nodded. "I will come on Saturday if that is acceptable." "It is acceptable," Aldric said. "Thank you." They left the minister's house and walked back through town. At the general store, Aldric bought fabric for Mira to make a new dress, something fine for the ceremony. The shopkeeper, a woman named Mrs. Harlan, served them without comment, but her expression was pinched with disapproval. Aldric paid and thanked her with pointed courtesy, and they left. "That was unpleasant," Mira said when they were back on the wagon. "Yes," Aldric agreed, "but necessary. And it will not be the last unpleasant reaction we encounter. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Mira said. "As long as I have you, I can face anything." "You will always have me," Aldric promised. "Always." Saturday came, clear and bright with the promise of true spring. Mira had made her dress, a simple but elegant design in deep blue that complemented her green skin beautifully. She wove wildflowers into her braid, and when Aldric saw her, he felt his breath catch. She was stunning, strong and beautiful, and his. Reverend Thorne arrived in the late morning, still looking disapproving but determined to fulfill his duty. They stood together in the yard in front of the cabin, with the forest behind them and the fields stretching out to either side, and they spoke the vows that would bind them together. "Do you, Aldric Whitmore, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do," Aldric said, his voice clear and firm. "And do you, Mira Ashenkith, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do," Mira said, her amber eyes locked on Aldric's, shining with joy. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. May God have mercy on you both." The last was said with a trace of sour disapproval, but Aldric ignored it. He pulled Mira into his arms and kissed her, deep and tender, and she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they broke apart, they were both grinning. Reverend Thorne cleared his throat awkwardly, had them sign the marriage certificate, and then departed with unseemly haste, as though afraid of lingering too long in their unorthodox presence. "Well, wife," Aldrich said when the minister's wagon had disappeared down the road, "what would you like to do on our wedding day?" "Work," Mira said promptly. "There is planting to be done, and the barn needs repairs and a dozen other tasks. We do not have time to be idle." Aldrich laughed. "You are the most practical romantic I have ever met." "And you are the most romantic practical man I have ever met," she shot back. "We balance each other." "That we do," he agreed. "All right, my love, let us work." So they spent their wedding day doing what they did best, working side by side, building their life together. They planted the early crops, repaired the barn door that had been sticking, mucked out stalls and mended fences. They worked until the sun began to set, and then they went inside, washed up, and Mira prepared a special meal, the finest she could make with the ingredients they had. They ate by candlelight, feeding each other bites, laughing and talking. After dinner, Aldrich pulled her into a slow dance in the main room, humming a melody since they had no music. She followed his lead, graceful despite her strength, and they swayed together in the candlelight, perfectly content. That night, they made love for the first time, a gentle, tender exploration that was as much about trust and intimacy as it was about pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "I never imagined this," Mira said softly. "When I was sent away from the clan, I thought my life was over. I thought I would be alone forever or trapped in some loveless arrangement at best. But this, what we have, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I felt the same," Aldrich said. "After the war, I was just existing, not really living. But you changed that. You made me want to build something, to hope again. You gave me a future worth fighting for." "We gave each other a future," Mira corrected. "Neither of us could have done this alone." "No," he agreed. "But together I think we can do anything." She lifted her head to kiss him, slow and sweet. "Together," she echoed. "Always together." The spring unfolded into summer, and their life together grew richer and deeper. They worked the farm with shared purpose, expanding the fields, improving the outbuildings, increasing the livestock. The work was hard, but they thrived on it, on the satisfaction of seeing tangible results from their labor. In June, Mira discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, small signs that she recognized from having seen other women in the clan go through the same process. When she told Aldrich, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. They had talked about children, had hoped for them eventually, but neither had expected it to happen so quickly. "We are going to be parents," Aldrich said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach with something like reverence. "You are going to be a mother." "And you are going to be a father," Mira said, covering his hand with hers. "Are you ready for that?" "Probably not," he admitted, "but I am willing to learn. We will figure it out together the way we figure out everything else." "Together," she agreed and kissed him. The pregnancy progressed well. Mira remained strong and healthy, continuing to work on the farm with only minor adjustments as her body changed. Aldrich fretted over her, trying to insist she rest more, take on less of the heavy labor, and she would laugh and remind him that orc women were built for endurance, that she was not fragile. But she allowed him his small courtesies, the way he brought her water without being asked, the way he took over tasks he knew tired her, the way he rubbed her aching feet in the evenings. They began preparing for the baby, turning a corner of the bedroom into a small nursery space. Aldrich built a cradle from oak, carving it with intricate designs, while Mira sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They argued good-naturedly over names, making lists and debating the merits of each option. It was a happy time, full of anticipation and hope. In late summer, they made another trip to town for supplies. Mira was visibly pregnant now, her condition obvious to anyone who looked. The reactions in Ashford ranged from scandalized whispers to outright hostility. One man spat at their feet as they walked past, and Aldric had to be restrained from responding with violence. Mira squeezed his hand hard and pulled him onward, her head held high, refusing to give the man the satisfaction of a reaction. "At the general store, Mrs. Harlan was more openly contemptuous than before. "It is an abomination," she said loudly to another customer, clearly intending for Mira to hear. "Mixing blood like that, the child will be a monster." Mira stopped and turned to face the woman. "My child," she said clearly, "will be loved. Which is more than I can say for the spawn of your vicious tongue. Teach your children hate if you must, but do not expect the world to applaud you for it." Mrs. Harlan's face went red, but before she could respond, Aldric stepped forward. "We are paying customers," he said coldly. "Either serve us with the courtesy any customer deserves, or we will take our business elsewhere, and we will make sure everyone knows why." The store fell silent. Mrs. Harlan pressed her lips into a thin line, then began ringing up their purchases with stiff, angry movements. They paid and left, and once they were outside, Mira let out a shaky breath. "That was harder than I expected," she admitted. "You were magnificent," Aldric said. "Fierce and proud and absolutely right. I am so proud of you," she smiled wanly. "It should not be this difficult. We are doing nothing wrong. No, we are not. But people fear what they do not understand, and they lash out at what they fear. All we can do is live our lives as well as we can and hope that, eventually, they realize how foolish they have been. And if they do not, then we do not need them," Aldric said firmly. "We have each other and we have our farm, and soon we will have our child. That is enough. That is everything." They returned home and did not go back to Ashford for the rest of the summer. Aldric made arrangements with a traveling merchant to bring supplies out to the farm, paying a premium for the convenience, but deciding it was worth it to spare Mira further hostility. They focused on their work, on their preparations, on the quiet joy of their life together. In early autumn, as the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp, Mira went into labor. It was early morning, and she woke Aldric with a hand on his shoulder and a calm statement that the baby was coming. He bolted upright, suddenly wide awake and terrified. "Should I get the midwife?" he asked. The nearest midwife was in town an hour away. "Should I boil water? What do I do?" "You stay with me," Mira said. "I do not need a midwife. Orc women birth their own children, but I would like you here if you are willing." "Of course I am willing," Aldric said. "Tell me what you need." She did, and he followed her instructions, bringing clean linens and water, building up the fire, helping her into the most comfortable position. The labor was long and difficult, but Mira bore it with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. She gripped Aldric's hand hard enough to leave bruises, and she cried out with the worst of the pains, but she never wavered, never faltered. And then, in the late afternoon, as the sun slanted through the bedroom window, their daughter was born. She came into the world with a lusty cry, waving tiny fists, and Aldric cut the cord with shaking hands while Mira laughed and cried at the same time. He cleaned the baby gently and wrapped her in soft blankets, then placed her in Mira's arms. They looked down at her together, at this tiny, perfect person they had created. She had Mira's green skin, though lighter, and what looked like the beginning of small tusks. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were a stunning blue, Aldric's eyes. Her ears were pointed but smaller than full orc ears, a perfect blend of both her parents. "She is beautiful," Aldric whispered, awestruck. "She is perfect. She is ours," Mira said, tears streaming down her face. "Our daughter." They had decided on the name weeks ago, but saying it aloud for the first time made it real. "Welcome, Maya," Aldric said softly, touching one tiny hand. "Welcome to the world, little one." Maya yawned and snuggled closer to Mira's chest, already seeking to nurse. Mira helped her latch on, wincing slightly but smiling through it. Aldric sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Mira's shoulders, watching his daughter nurse with a sense of wonder so profound it bordered on religious. "We did it," Mira said. "We made a family." "We did," Aldric agreed. "And we are going to give her the best life we possibly can. She is going to grow up knowing she is loved, knowing she is wanted, knowing that she can be anything she wants to be. She will face challenges," Mira said quietly. "Being half orc, half human, she will not fully belong to either world. People will judge her, reject her. Then we will teach her to be strong," Aldric said. "The way her mother is strong, and we will teach her to be kind the way we have tried to be kind. And we will surround her with so much love that the judgment of small-minded people will not matter." Mira leaned her head against his shoulder. "I am so glad I met you, Aldric, so glad that I was sent back, that I got on that train, that you were waiting at the station. My life began the day you called me lovely." Aldric blinked. "I called you lovely at the station," Mira said. "When I first stepped off the train, and I was so frightened and ashamed. You looked at me, really looked at me, and I heard you say it under your breath. Lovely. As though I was something precious, something worth treasuring. No one had ever called me that before. It gave me hope that maybe this could work, that maybe you would be different." Aldric tried to remember that moment, that first glimpse of her on the platform. He had thought it, certainly, had been struck by her presence even in her distress. He must have spoken aloud without realizing it. "You are lovely," he said now. "You were then, and you are now, and you always will be to me. Inside and out, Mira, you are the loveliest person I have ever known." She turned her head and kissed him, awkward with the baby between them but heartfelt. "I love you. I love you too, both of you. My girls." They stayed like that as the afternoon faded into evening, a small family in their small cabin, wrapped in warmth and love and perfect contentment. Outside, the world went on with its judgments and its prejudices, but in that room, none of it mattered. They had each other, and they had their daughter, and they had built something real and true and lasting. The weeks after Maya's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant activity. She was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs, and she made her needs known with impressive volume. Aldric and Mira took turns walking her, soothing her, marveling at every tiny milestone. Her first smile, her first time gripping Aldric's finger with surprising strength, her first time sleeping through the night. They fell into a new routine, one that revolved around Maya's schedule. Mira wore her in a sling while she worked around the house, keeping the baby close while still getting things done. Aldric would take over in the evenings, holding Maya while Mira rested, singing to her in his off-key voice, telling her stories about the farm and the animals and all the things they would do together when she was older. As autumn deepened into winter, they received an unexpected visitor. Aldric was in the barn when he heard the sound of hoofbeats on the frozen ground. He emerged to see a lone rider approaching, wrapped in furs against the cold. As the rider drew closer, he saw it was an orc, a tall male with the distinctive warrior markings of the northern clans. Aldric's hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt, but he forced himself to remain calm. The rider stopped a respectful distance away and dismounted. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with graying hair and scars that spoke of a lifetime of combat. "I am looking for Mira Ashenkith," the orc said in accented but clear human speech. "I was told she lives here." "She does," Aldric said carefully. "May I ask your business with her?" "I am Malik Ashenkith, her brother." Aldric felt a jolt of surprise. Mira had mentioned her brother only briefly, saying they had not been close, that he had disapproved of her decision to leave the clan. "Wait here," he said. "I will get her." He went into the cabin, where Mira was nursing Maya by the fire. "Your brother is here," he said quietly. Mira's eyes went wide. "Malik, are you certain?" He gave his name as Mira Ashenkith. She stood, carefully adjusting Maya, and wrapped a shawl around them both. "I will speak with him. Stay close in case there is trouble." They went outside together. Malik was still standing where Aldric had left him, his expression carefully neutral. When he saw Mira, something shifted in his face, surprise and perhaps relief. "Sister," he said. "Brother," Mira replied, her voice guarded. "What brings you here?" Malik glanced at Aldric, then back at Mira. "May we speak privately? Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my husband," Mira said firmly. "And you can meet your niece while you are at it." Malik's eyes dropped to the bundle in Mira's arms, and his expression went through a rapid series of changes. "You had a child." "I did. Her name is Maya." Malik stepped closer slowly, his hands open and non-threatening. He looked down at the baby, at her mixed features, and his face softened. "She is beautiful. She looks like you did as an infant." "Thank you," Mira said, still wary. "Now tell me why you are here, Malik." "We have not spoken in over a year. You made it clear you disapproved of my choices." Malik sighed. "I did disapprove. I thought you were making a terrible mistake, throwing away your heritage and your family for an uncertain future, but I was wrong." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I heard rumors that you had married a human, that you were living on a frontier farm. I came to see for myself, to make sure you were all right. And I see that you are more than all right. You are happy." "I am," Mira said. "Aldric is a good man, a good husband. He treats me with respect and love. We have built a life together, and now we have Maya. I do not regret my choice." "I can see that," Malik said. "And I am glad. I am sorry, Mira. Sorry I did not support you when you needed it. Sorry I let you leave without trying to understand. I was bound by tradition and pride, and I let those things matter more than my sister's happiness." Mira was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you wish to come inside, to warm yourself and meet your niece properly?" "I would like that very much," Malik said. They went into the cabin, and Aldric made tea while Malik and Mira talked. It was awkward at first, years of distance and hurt between them, but gradually they found their footing. Malik told her news of the clan, of their mother who was well and sent her love, of the changes in leadership and politics. Mira told him about the farm, about her marriage, about the challenges they had faced and overcome. Malik held Maya carefully, his large, scarred hands surprisingly gentle with the tiny baby. "She is strong," he said. "I can feel it. She will be a warrior if she chooses, or a farmer or a scholar or anything else she wants," Mira said. "We will not limit her." "Good," Malik said. "That is good." He looked at Aldric. "You have given my sister a good life. I thank you for that." "She has given me a good life as well," Aldric said. "We are partners in all things." Malik nodded approvingly. "That is how it should be." He handed Maya back to Mira. "I should go. I have a long journey back, and I should start before the weather turns worse." "You could stay," Mira offered. "At least for the night. It is too cold to travel after dark." Malik considered, then nodded. "If you are certain, I would not be imposing." "You are family," Mira said simply. "You are always welcome." Malik stayed, and over dinner, the awkwardness faded further. He told stories of the clan, tales that made Mira laugh with recognition and nostalgia. Aldric listened, learning more about Mira's past, about the world she had come from. He liked Malik, liked his gruff honesty and his obvious love for his sister, even if he had struggled to show it properly before. In the morning, Malik prepared to leave. He embraced Mira, a long, tight hug that spoke volumes. "Come visit if you can," he said. "Mother would love to see you and to meet her granddaughter. You would be welcome in the clan, both of you." "Both of us," Mira repeated. "Your husband and your daughter as well," Malik clarified. "Times are changing, sister. Slowly, but they are changing. There are others in the clan who have made similar choices, who have married outside our people. It is no longer the scandal it once was." "I will think about it," Mira said. "And I thank you, Malik, for coming, for apologizing. It means more than you know." He nodded and mounted his horse. With a final wave, he rode off into the winter morning, disappearing into the trees. Mira stood watching until he was out of sight, tears on her cheeks. Aldric put his arm around her, and she leaned into him. "I did not think I would ever see him again," she said. "I did not think any of my family would accept this life, but maybe there is hope after all." "There is always hope," Aldric said. "We are proof of that." Winter settled in fully, and they hunkered down against the cold. Maya grew rapidly, becoming more alert and interactive. She smiled at everything, giggled at Aldric's silly faces, and tracked Mira's movements with rapt attention. She was a happy baby, content and curious, and she brought a light to the cabin that made even the darkest days bright. In the spring, when the roads cleared, they made another trip to Ashford. This time they brought Maya. Aldric carried her in a sling against his chest, and Mira walked beside him with her head high. They went to the general store, and when Mrs. Harlan saw the baby, her expression went through a complicated series of changes. She served them without comment this time, though not warmly, and they took it as a small victory. As they were leaving, a young woman approached them on the street. She was human, perhaps 20, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to say your daughter is beautiful, and I think what you are doing, building a life together despite what people say, I think it is brave." Mira blinked in surprise. "Thank you. That is kind of you to say." "I am engaged to a dwarf," the young woman said, lowering her voice. "My family is furious. They say it is unnatural that I should marry a human man, but I love him, and I do not care what anyone thinks. Seeing you two, seeing that it can work, it gives me courage." "It is not always easy," Aldric said. "People will judge and there will be difficult times, but if you love each other and support each other, you can make it work. Do not let fear or prejudice stop you from being happy." The young woman smiled. "Thank you, I needed to hear that." She glanced around nervously, then hurried away. Mira and Aldric exchanged a look. "We are not alone," Mira said softly. "There are others making the same choice, taking the same risks. And maybe, in time, it will stop being a risk at all," Aldric said. "Maybe Maya will grow up in a world where love matters more than species." "Maybe," Mira agreed. "That is a good thing to hope for." They returned to the farm and continued their life. The years rolled on, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their growing daughter. Maya took her first steps in the summer of her first year, toddling between Aldric and Mira while they cheered her on. She spoke her first word at 14 months, "Mama," which made Mira cry happy tears. She was a bright, inquisitive child, always asking questions, always exploring. They had another child when Maya was 3, a son they named Marcus. He had more human features than his sister, with only a faint green tint to his skin and no tusks, but the same blue eyes and black hair. The farm prospered, expanding as their family grew. They built the addition Aldric had planned, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They bought more livestock, cleared more land, became fixtures in the rural community if not always fully accepted ones. Malik visited regularly, bringing news from the clan and gifts for his niece and nephew. Mira's mother came once, a frail but fierce old orc woman who wept at seeing her daughter so happy and blessed her grandchildren with traditional prayers. The divide between their old lives and their new one began to close, not entirely, but enough to feel like healing. In town, attitudes shifted gradually. The young woman who had approached them that day married her dwarf and they settled in the area. Another mixed couple arrived, a human woman and an orc man, and then another. It was still not common, still controversial, but no longer unheard of. Mrs. Harlan remained cold, but she was civil, and others in town began to thaw. The blacksmith, a gruff man named Tom, struck up a friendship with Aldric, impressed by his work ethic and his skill. The seamstress made clothes for the children without complaint, even complimented Mira on her own sewing. It was not perfect. There were still incidents, still slurs and hostility. But it was better, and it kept getting better, inch by inch, year by year. When Maya was 7, she came home from school in tears. A boy had called her a half-breed, said she was a freak. Aldric and Mira held her between them, letting her cry, and then they talked about it. People will say hurtful things, Mira told her gently. Because they are afraid or ignorant or because someone taught them to be cruel. It is not about you, Maya, it is about them. But why? Maya sobbed. Why do they care what I am? Because they do not understand that being different is not bad, Aldric said. You are not less because you are half orc and half human. You are more. You have the best of both worlds, the strength and honor of your mother's people and the adaptability and creativity of mine. You are unique and special and wonderful, exactly as you are. Your father is right, Mira said. And we will always be here to remind you of that, no matter what anyone else says. You are loved, Maya, never doubt that. Maya sniffled and nodded. Can I learn to fight, so I can defend myself if I need to? Aldric and Mira exchanged a glance. Yes, Mira said. I will teach you what I know of orc combat, and your father can teach you what he learned in the army. Not so you can hurt others, but so you can protect yourself and stand strong. Being strong does not mean being violent, but it does mean not being a victim. And we will teach you to use words as well as fists, Aldric added, because sometimes the best defense is speaking your truth with confidence. Maya hugged them both. Thank you. I love you. We love you too, sweetheart, they said together and held her until she felt strong again. The children grew, healthy and happy despite the challenges they faced. Maya became fierce and confident, her mother's daughter through and through, while Marcus was quieter, more contemplative, with a love of books and learning. They worked on the farm alongside their parents, learning responsibility and the value of hard work. They played in the fields and forests, explored the creek, built forts and imagined grand adventures. Aldric and Mira grew older as well, their bodies marked by years of labor, but their love undiminished. If anything, it deepened, the easy intimacy of long partnership, of two people who had been through trials together and emerged stronger for it. They still stole kisses in the barn, still held hands walking through the fields, still found joy in each other's company after all these years. On their 10th anniversary, Aldric took Mira to the spot where they had been married, in the yard in front of the cabin. The children were with a neighbor for the day, giving them rare privacy. He took her hands and looked into her amber eyes, still as beautiful as the day he first saw her on that train platform. 10 years, he said. 10 years since I stood on that platform and waited, not knowing if you would come or what would happen if you did. And every day since has been a gift. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. You have given me a family and a purpose and a happiness I never thought I would have. I love you more today than I did when we spoke these vows the first time, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for choosing me, Mira. Thank you for staying. Mira was crying, but she was smiling too. Thank you for waiting on that platform. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me when I felt invisible and worthless. Thank you for calling me lovely, for treating me with kindness, for building this life with me. You have given me everything I never knew I needed. I love you, Aldric, with everything I am." They kissed, there under the open sky, with the wind rustling the leaves and the sun warm on their faces. It was not so different from their wedding day, and yet everything had changed. They were no longer two desperate, lonely people taking a chance on each other. They were partners, parents, a family forged in love and strengthened by time. Years continued to pass. The farm thrived, becoming known throughout the region for quality produce and well-bred livestock. The children grew into young adults, strong and capable and kind. Maya trained as a blacksmith, her orc strength making her exceptionally skilled at the work, and she opened her own shop in town. Marcus went to university to study law, determined to fight for justice and equality for all people regardless of species. Aldric and Mira began to slow down, letting the younger generation take over more of the farm work. They spent their days in quieter pursuits, gardening, reading, enjoying their grandchildren when Maya married a human man and started a family of her own. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Mira asked one evening, her voice soft. "The difficulties we faced, the prejudice, the struggles. Do you ever wish you had chosen an easier path?" Aldric squeezed her hand. "Never. Not once. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Mira. This life, this family, it is everything I could have wanted and more. If I had to do it all again, face all the same challenges, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because it brought me here to this moment with you." "I feel the same," Mira said. "I was so lost when I got on that train, so certain my life was over, but it was just beginning. You gave me hope, Aldric. You gave me love. You gave me a home." "We gave each other those things," Aldric said. "And we built something that will outlast us. Look at our children, our grandchildren. They are living in a world that is better than the one we inherited, a world where love matters more than difference. That is our legacy." "It is a good legacy," Mira agreed. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and content. The stars began to appear overhead, bright against the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear the sound of their grandchildren playing, laughter ringing out pure and joyful. "Do you remember," Aldric said, "that first day on the platform? How scared you looked, how determined not to show it." "I remember," Mira said. "I thought you would be like the other man, that this would be another disaster. But then you looked at me and I saw kindness in your eyes and I heard you call me lovely. And I thought maybe, just maybe, this could work." "I am glad you took that chance," Aldric said. "So am I," Mira replied. "So very glad." They sat together as the night deepened. Two old lovers who had built a life from nothing, who had faced the world's judgment and come through it hand in hand. They had been returned and redeemed, damaged goods that became something precious and whole. They had met at a train station and built a dynasty of love, and the world was better for their courage. Many years later, when Aldric lay on his deathbed surrounded by his family, he held Mira's hand and looked into her eyes one last time. "Still lovely," he whispered. "After all these years, still the loveliest thing I have ever seen." Mira kissed his forehead, tears streaming down her green face. "And you are still the kindest man I have ever known. Wait for me, my love. I will not be far behind." "I will wait for you at the station," Aldric said with a small smile. "Just like I did the first time." He closed his eyes then, peaceful and content, and passed surrounded by love. Mira followed him 2 years later, dying quietly in her sleep in the cabin they had built together. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the farm, under a tree they had planted on their first anniversary. The headstone reads simply, "Aldric and Mira Whitmore, beloved partners, devoted parents, proof that love transcends all boundaries. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued the farm, continued the legacy of courage and love they had established. The world continued to change, slowly becoming more accepting, more open. Mixed marriages became more common, prejudice began to fade, and a new generation grew up seeing love as love, regardless of species or difference. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, those who lived on the farm swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand through the fields, an old human man and an old orc woman, still together, still in love, still lovely after all these years. They were only shadows, only memories, but they were also something more. A reminder that courage and kindness could change the world, one small act at a time, starting with a man who waited at a train station and told a frightened orc woman she was lovely, and meant it with all his heart.